Real quick, I want to apologize for this video taking so long. I wanted to release it in April, but I was well into editing before I realized I just hated the voiceover and formatting, so I decided to just start over with it. Thanks for being patient. To be honest, I don't really understand a lot of hate towards rewrites since they're so undefined, arguably any fanfiction could be called one. A high school AU? It's just a rewrite where the girls go to a normal school in a normal world. I feel like the reason people in the Ruby community don't like rewrites is because the biggest ones just tend to have unpopular ideas. Yes, I've heard the phase Faunus heat cycle about 50 too many times, and honestly, I think it's hilarious. But I'm not here to laugh at other people's rewrites. I had some ideas for a rewrite that I thought were at least decent, hopefully not horrible. That being said, I definitely don't have enough time to make a whole rewrite, so I decided to just make a video sharing my ideas instead. I started off by separating them into two main groups, those being smaller changes that wouldn't affect the overall storyline and order of events in the show, and then just the extra fun stuff that I either couldn't fit in the first category or would have larger effects on the show. And from there, I just went in chronological order. Starting off in Volume 5, I would add a scene where Blake and Sun just sit down and talk about their relationship. Basically, she just apologizes for hitting him and tells him, hey, I'm no longer interested. It's really lame for them to just pretend that they never liked each other when it would be so mature for the two of them to acknowledge the fact that they did like each other, but they would rather just stay friends. And you can lean in or foreshadow this throughout Volume 5 by having Blake be less receptive towards Sun's flirting. But, maybe Sun doesn't notice because he's a big dummy, or maybe Blake's just so apathetic that he doesn't realize she's not reciprocating. Anyways, just the idea of Blake rejecting Sun, even though she knows that it's gonna hurt him, it shows that she's grown into a person who's not willing to let other people push her into doing things she doesn't want to for their own happiness. And at the end, you could imply that she likes somebody else, ooh, I wonder who that could be, wink wink. I mean, it's obviously it's gonna be Yang, but ooh. Anyways, continuing with Bumblebee, in Volume 6, just have Blake and Yang talk to each other about it. It doesn't have to be right at the beginning of the volume. I like the idea that Yang decides to quote-unquote forgive Blake for the sake of the group, but is still hesitant about her and avoids being alone with her. For the most part, the only thing that really have to change to sell that would be the delivery of Yang's dialogue, just make it more hesitant when she's talking to Blake on the train. Obviously, I'd keep the scene of the two at the farm. It's a good way of continuing their plot. Maybe just add a line where Yang implies she's still upset about Blake leaving her. Then when they get to Argus, they can have a scene where Blake tries to confront Yang, apologize and explain why she left. Yang, however, doesn't really want to deal with a confrontation, so she's just like, it's fine, there's nothing for us to talk about. But Blake's like, no, it's not fine, come talk to me, and the two have a heart-to-heart about everything that happens. I think I would have it end with Yang being more sure about the two of them and their relationship, but with Blake still being kind of hesitant because she's still worried that Yang will get hurt because of her again, which would therefore be wrapped up in the Atom fight. I'm not sure if I'd want them to get together at the end of Volume 6, because I don't like the idea of a romantic relationship getting dragged out for no reason other than bait, but I also feel like it'd be way too quick of a transition from hesitant about each other's presence to immediately dating, but I don't know. As for more Volume 6 stuff, I'd have the kids be maybe just a little bit more considerate towards Ozpin. It's understandable why they're upset with him for lying, but they really all just went in on him. Some different reactions from the kids, little bit of conflict that they can discuss instead of them just all being pissed off. I don't know. It's just a thought. Then, when they get to Argus, I would change the reason that Cordo doesn't let them leave. Basically, let's say, hypothetically, they have these underwater scanners out in the ocean that picked up on some giant movement that's heading straight to Argus, and they can't risk using any resources to send Team RWBY to Atlas because of it. They gotta protect Argus. Team RWBY, of course, will realize that having the relic there would only put them in more danger because it's attracting whatever is coming to Argus, and they try to convince Cordo to let them leave, but they can't because obviously they can't tell her about the relic. And it would end with them agreeing to help with the oncoming Grimm and then just take an airship to Atlas afterwards. I know there's technically the embargo to stop them, but I feel like at least Maria, Weiss, and maybe Crow, since he's a licensed huntsman, should be able to pull some strings that can get there. Like, obviously in the show, they're all for Weiss going home, but like, Maria needs to get to Atlas in order to fix her eyes. And like I said, maybe Crow can do something since he's a licensed huntsman and he knows James. The point of changing this justification for them staying in Atlas, number one, it's to foreshadow the Leviathan, so that way at the end of the volume when it shows up, it's like, oh my god, that was the Grimm movement the whole time, that thing's huge. And of course there's all the other Grimm that came with it. But it also just shows the scope of the relic's effect on Grimm. Like, that thing helped drag in a giant Leviathan from who knows how far out in the ocean. And it make their trip to take it to Atlas and get it somewhere safe all the more important. So after they have that discussion with Cordo, they go back to Saffron and Tara's house and they tell Team Juniper everything they learned about Osmond and Salem. John yells at Oscar and Oscar runs away. But instead of having the scene with Jean and the red-haired lady at Pierre's statue, I would have Oscar at Pierre's statue. And I think ideally Ruby would be there as well, because not only is she the main character, her and Jean are both team leaders that can give Oscar advice. Oscar opens up to them and tells him that he's worried that he's going to be lost to this long line of Ozma reincarnations for no reason, since he's like, Salem can't be killed, what am I going to do about it? And Ruby and Jean reassure him in some way. I don't know how. They tell him, nah, I don't know. And then afterwards, they go with him to pick out his new clothes. And I think it'd be really cute if there was like little bits of Ruby and Jean's fashion, like their fashion choices reflected in Oscar's new outfit. Just a way to show like these characters are becoming closer. Oscar is becoming part of the group and he's growing closer to the people in the group. The next day, the group heads to the military base, but Yang and Blake are somehow separated from the rest of the group by Adam. Oh my gosh. Maybe they just like see him and they're like, oh my god, that's Adam. He's gotta be up to something. Before this, I would foreshadow him going to Argus in some way so he doesn't just like show up randomly. You know, maybe there's like a shot of him sitting on the train in a cloak or just normal civilian clothes in the beginning, or maybe when Team RWBY first arrive, there's a shot of him like realizing, oh, they're here. I think I'd want Ruby and Weiss to follow them while the rest go to help the military, because number one, I want Weiss to see his scar reveal. I think it'd give her a lot of motivation to change the Schnee Dust Company. And also, I just think it'd be really cool to see Team RWBY fighting an opponent all together again. Since I think the last time they had like a big 4-on-1 fight was like the Volume 2 Paladin fight. That being said, Yang and Blake can absolutely still have their big moments with him. He's most important to their arcs, so getting rid of those moments would be bad. After beating up Adam and everything, I'd have just Blake stab him, because number one, we wouldn't have to deal with the whole, is Yang a murderer or not? It's kind of an annoying argument. It just wouldn't even be a problem. But also, it'd give Blake some future inner conflict that Yang has a hard time relating to, you know, and like she has a hard time helping her with it. Just some future Bumblebee angst to further their relationship. But yeah, Adam is defeated. Then Team RWBY goes and reunites with everyone else wherever they're fighting the Grimm, and just as they get there, Leviathan shows up to the battle. Cordo gets into her giant mech to fight it, while Team RWBY go to help with the smaller Grimm, but RWBY realizes that Cordo's struggling against the Leviathan, so she goes to help her. From there, it pretty much plays out the same. She uses Jin and her silver eyes to stop the Grimm long enough for Cordo to beat it. End of the volume. Great job. They fly off to Atlas in their airship. For Volume 7, I only have one point that I focused on, which was the whole Aesop's friendship arc, and it kind of spills into Volume 8, but whatever. It's fine. I like the idea of it. It kind of just shows up and disappears and then pops back up in Volume 8. You know, Harriet states that they don't view each other as friends, and it really doesn't build on that until all of a sudden they're betraying each other, which, you know, you'd have to become friends in order to betray each other. So I would add a scene where the Aesops, or maybe just Harriet, since she's the one that said it, would open up to Team RWBY and all their friends instead of just having the montage. The montage doesn't really work as well because it doesn't establish like the point the group becomes closer, especially since they don't act any different to each other than they did before. Even when Harriet said, "Oh, we're not friends," they're still like joking and acting around and messing around and stuff with each other. The montage mostly just shows like RWBY and Juniper adjusting to their lives as huntsmen. And this is especially important with Harriet because she is the one that the arc is like focused around, right? She's the one that says they're not friends, and she's the one who is all upset that Team RWBY fought them and then that Clover died and replacing him with Winter and everything. She's like the main focus of the arc. And if you wanted, you could also just add little moments where characters, maybe in the background, they interact in a way that implies that they're more than just co-workers. Like, you could show a parallel scene where at first they're just like, "Oh, hi," like, you know, being polite like you would with your coworker, but later they're like actually joking around. Or not only is John, Oscar, and Weiss going to see the movie, maybe Elm is going to see the movie with them. It shows that these characters are growing closer, and all of this would make their fight at the end of Volume 7 more effective with, you know, RWBY and Harriet's conflicting priorities, you know, friendship versus loyalty, and then Crow, quote-unquote, killing Clover would also be like the turning point for Harriet, since they were supposed to be friends, but Crow still killed Clover. And it would also help showing Harriet and Clover's relationship before Clover dies, so that way we can like understand why these characters care about each other, so that way when she's really upset about his death, it hits harder. Maybe he's the one that encourages her to open up to Team RWBY, and then the plain stuff in Volume 8 can play out about the same. Moving on to Volume 8, the main change that I would put in is Cinder's backstory, and this is largely based around some themes that we see in the song Sacrifice, and also her apparent hatred of Atlas, specifically her dialogue with Winter in Volume 7, where she's talking about Atlas specialists and whatnot. I want to address this. I heard somewhere that Sacrifice is apparently a Salem song. I have no idea how credible that claim is, but since there's no evidence of that being confirmed by any of the showrunners or anybody that works on the show, and it also came out a volume before Salem was ever introduced, like she wasn't even foreshadowed in Volume 2, I'm going to view it as applicability and not necessarily intention. Anyway, so back to the backstory. Cinder was in the Atlas military, you know, that's where she got her training, and likely before that she was an orphan. So she's had to rely on herself mostly all her life, and she's worked a lot to get where she's gotten to. Her metaphorical stepmother was a higher ranked officer who treated Cinder like Garbo, okay? And her stepsisters were either some middle ground between Cinder and the stepmother, or they were of the same rank but got better treatment from the stepmother and would often push Cinder around. Because of this, Cinder aspired to get back at them by working until she could outrank them or something. But before she could do this, her regiment was sent on a mission. You know, maybe Ironwood had someone like a Glinda, another teacher or high-ranked officer that he had told about Salem, and they were trying to sneak into her territory and get some info on her so that way they can launch an attack on her or something. And like Cinder's regiment was basically a distraction, or maybe even death fodder. And of course they get wrecked by the Grimm, like they went right into Salem's territory. What did they expect? And Cinder is the last one standing when Salem appears. Whoa! Salem commends Cinder for surviving and asks Cinder to join her with, she promises her power, which Cinder agrees to. I'd also add a little detail in there just to reference the Grimm version of the story where Cinder is believed dead, but she travels back to Atlas in secret and she blinds the stepsisters and probably kills the stepmother. I also just think it'd be funny if her name was originally closer to Ella as another reference to the fairy tale, but also to make Raven's line in Volume 5 even funnier, where she just accuses Cinder of picking her own name and Cinder just gets annoyed because it's actually true and she just chose, it's just that cheesy of a name that she decided to choose, and she's like, well, no, that kind of joke. But yeah, so that's Cinder's backstory. The next thing that I would do with Volume 8 has to do with the Staff of Creation. I would change it from a staff to a wand, so that way it'd be the fairy godmother's wand. There's nothing wrong with it being a staff. I just feel like staves are kind of basic. I can't really think of many iconic staffs in fairy tales. But as far as wands, they're really, for me at least, there's few memorable ones. You got the fairy godmother's wand from Cinderella and the blue fairy's wand from Pinocchio. And you know what's crazy is it could be both, right? There's nothing saying it can't be both, so I'm gonna make it both. It's already very important to Penny. She is the Winter Maiden, so to make it the fairy godmother's wand, I just make it important to Cinder. Really important in some way, shape, or form. I don't know how, but somehow. And then, of course, at the end of the volume, she gives it to Salem, and it's revealed that Salem is also the fairy godmother. I think double illusions are really cool, especially since it makes Salem kind of a good guy and a bad guy because she's the fairy godmother and the Wicked Witch of the West, but she's just bad because she's pretty mean. She's the one who grants Cinder what she wants, right? She grants Cinder's wishes, but she does it for her own benefits. My final change for Volume 8, I would let Emerald use the lamp. She's Aladdin, man. It just feels like she should be able to use it. Like it's connected to her. They're from the same fairy tale. I don't know how to explain it. I have no idea what she should ask. I know that's not very convincing, but I feel like the characters and or items, I guess, that share illusions, they should be important to each other. They can have connections with other people from other fairy tales, but they share that connection to each other. I don't know, maybe she uses Jin like Ruby did in Volume 6, where she's not there to ask a question. Maybe she just talks to Jin. And even though she's not supposed to do that, Jin ends up just really liking talking to Emerald. Or she comes to care about her, and she gives Emerald the advice and encouragement that she doesn't get from Cinder. That, coupled with Oscar's help, convinces her to leave Salem. She brings the lamp to Team RWBY, and then maybe Jin and Oscar vouch for her. I don't know, man. Could be cool. I'm kinda digging the older sister relationship between Jin and Emerald now, or maybe more like a mother-daughter thing. I don't know. I came up with this idea on the fly, and now I kinda really like it, but whatever. Anyways, moving on, those probably aren't the only things I'd change if I had the time or brain power to do so, but since I don't, it's time to move on to the extra fun stuff. Like I said earlier, I have no clue if, when, or where these would happen, and some of them could still potentially happen in Canon RWBY, but I'm putting them here, so whatever. Starting off, I like the idea of just a full-on war against Salem and her forces. I don't really have much more of an explanation for this. I have this image in my brain of RWBY standing in front of a crowd of huntsmen, and she's she's pumping them up because she's leading them, and you can see in the distance a bunch of Grin, and there's this really big one, the whale or the dragon from season 3, who's I can't remember the actual name for it. And Salem's on top of it. And it's just whoa. And it's really cool, Next, I would give Mercury silver eyes, which is like, I know it's an old theory, and it's like, obviously it's been disproven by this point. The writers are like, no, he doesn't have the little eye speck. But you know what? This is my rewrite, so I do what I want. I think having a villain with silver eyes that's not all grimified could be really interesting, especially if he doesn't know he has them, or maybe he just doesn't care and is only interested in looking out for himself. And as far as the previously mentioned eye specs, I would just make it so that a silver-eyed warrior only gets them after they use their eyes for like the first time, which wouldn't be a hard thing to do since RWBY, I think, is the only character we've seen before and after she's been able to use them, and her poser model didn't have like the tiny specks in them, which I know is just like, it was probably just something that they didn't think about maybe, or I don't know. I'd also have Salem only be able to grimify people once they've unlocked the ability, so, you know, she's just kind of keeping Mercury around in case he unlocks his eyes, so that way she can make him into a grim. It's like growing a plant, I guess. At some point, Mercury would unlock his eyes, learn Salem was waiting for him to do that so she could grimify him, and you know, he would just like leave. I don't think he would join Team RWBY's side. He doesn't seem to show a lot of remorse for his actions, but his whole thing is about survival, so he definitely wouldn't stay with Salem. You know, he could just leave the narrative altogether. Maybe even Emerald would go with, since they seem to at least be friends. Like, just a way to thin out the cast without killing them off. And he could also turn himself into some kind of authorities. I don't know which ones or where any are, because Atlas is apparently the only military, but maybe he just like assumes he'd be safest there. I just thought of what could be like a really cool moment where like he turns himself in and is like, he's being held somewhere and is just not present for a few seasons because he's in jail and like away from the main characters. But once the storyline and Salem get to wherever he's held, Salem destroys the prison he's in, or maybe he makes a deal with who's ever holding him there to like, he helps and they pardon him of his crimes or something. And there's this cool moment where he like gets out and is helping fighting the Grim. I don't know. It could be cool. It could be cool. And then after that, he leaves. You know, I just don't think he'd be into the whole good guy thing. Continuing off of that last point, I would let RWBY know that he has silver eyes because I think it could make for an interesting dynamic between the two. You know, maybe she tries to convince him that he can be good because she's like, silver-eyed warriors are given this power specifically to help people against the Grim, but he's just not having it. You know, it'd just be an interesting conflict of ideals with RWBY's whole helping people versus Mercury's prioritizing my own survival, and like how they each utilize their ability that they both have to do that. This next point is one that I didn't know where I should put it because it's kind of based around Cinder's canon backstory, and like you could technically work it into the one that I gave her, but I came up with it while I was thinking about Cinder and Mercury's backstories, which is leaning in on the parallels between the two. Yeah, I didn't even realize, but their backstories are like pretty similar. You know, both of them have abusive parents that scar them in some way, and then they both end up killing their parents, which allows them to be free until they meet Salem, I guess. I think this could be a good opportunity to send a message about how positive influences can help people change into a better version of themselves. Because like Cinder doesn't really seem interested in letting anyone in, but like I said, Mercury and Emerald, they seem to be at least friends and they seem to care about each other. So having Emerald help Mercury away from Salem would be a good way to show that like letting the right people into your life can help you in the long run. Finally, my final point in this rewrite video is if I was not doing Bumblebee, I would do Freezer Burn. No argument, no discussion needed. They are my favorite RWBY ship. I love them so much. They're so cute with their dynamic, and like they have the height difference, they have the fire and ice, they have the rich girl and then the party girl. They're so adorable. I don't have, nor do I need any more justification. I love them so much. They are objectively the best RWBY ship, and if you think otherwise, you're wrong. Okay, that last part was a joke. But yeah, God, I would do freezer burn so bad. I love them so much. When is freezer burn week? Somebody tell me. Anyways, those were my RWBY Rewrite ideas. Hopefully they're as decent as I thought they were. Feel free to share your thoughts on them or any rewrite ideas that you feel comfortable sharing. I know they're pretty bare bones. Like, I did not put a lot of thought into them, but I enjoyed coming up with them. I think rewrites can be a pretty fun, like, writing exercise for anybody who's not interested in doing a whole rewrite, you know, taking characters from a previously established thing and deciding what you would do with them and how much you would change, that kind of thing. I didn't change a whole lot, even with my extra fun stuff. It probably could be fit into the lesser changed version that I had earlier, but it's a personal thing how much you want to change, so yeah. I also got to make a bunch of art for the video, some of which is better than others. My favorite is definitely Emerald with the Lamp. As for, like, future videos, I'm hoping to get something out for Magical Girl May. I don't know exactly what. This video took longer than expected, so I am behind schedule. I'm gonna try my best to get back on it. I like to do more review type stuff. I really like reviewing films. I just saw the new Doctor Strange recently, and, you know, it was okay. I have my thoughts on it. Thanks for watching. I hope your day is not terrible. It's good to hope for the best, but sometimes when you're just not feeling it, it's okay to just hope for just not the worst, you know? Yeah.